Good morning. This is Don.
Yeah, hi Don. This is Brandon. How are you doing today?
Very good.
You had a minute? I wanted to talk to you about some issues I've been dealing with here in Zanesville.
Sure, go ahead.
Well, I don't know if you recall. I was talking to you. We had some conversations, primarily through email, a while back about some noise issues here in Zanesville. Do you recall?
Sure, sure.
Do you remember when that was? That was what, the fall of, was it 2019 or 2020?
2020.
Okay, because you took office in the beginning of 2021. Is
20,
that correct?
2020.
2020. Okay. So it was before you took office. So we first started talking about this prior to you taking office. It was the fall just before you taking office. So that would have been, you took office in 2020, correct?
Brandon, what would you like?
Well, uh, trying to make sense of this. It doesn't make any sense to me how it goes from you letting me know and informing me that when you were hiring Doug Murray that you're going to make it a priority for him to address the noise issue, and how that turns into my life being destroyed and no one actually investigating the noise problem and paying attention to it. I'm just trying to make sense of why this is.
Let me ask you this. Do you remember when I asked Chris Cover to go to your office, to go to your house to try to set up like a monitoring or some sort of electronic device so we could figure out the direction these signals were coming from? Do you remember that?
I remember you offering that, but I remember also letting you know that that's not necessary because the testing could be done from the easement. As well as, actually, according to the law, it's the closest area within the city limits to the offending property. So if it was the stave company that you're referring to, the place that would be tested from would be Sharon Avenue, right there by the property, the closest property within the city limits to their location. Or if it's in relation to casting solutions, it would be the closest property within the city limits to the property casting solutions out off of Licking Road. I mean,
I've had two complaints about casting solutions. You are one. The other comes from a person who lives on like Winding Way around Falls Township.
I don't know where that's at, but it doesn't make a difference.
Pardon me?
I was just saying I don't know where that's at, but it doesn't make a difference.
Do you know where Military and Dresden Road is?
Roughly, yeah.
Okay, so out that way.
Okay.
So what I wanted to do was try to identify exactly what you were either hearing or what electronic signals that were causing you an inconvenience, and then really use that as a way of identifying what was going on, at Casting Solutions. But Mr. Cover did go to your property. He did talk to you. You wouldn't let him set anything up. And so he called me and
Really?
said,
I don't
there's
remember
nothing I can do about it.
I don't recall him ever coming to my property.
Well, and I offered him a contract to set it up, and he came back and told me that he talked with you. You wouldn't let him in or on. That was about May, maybe April of 2020.
Okay, well, that's not exactly accurate. I think I had the same conversation with him as what I'm having with you now, and made the same comments to the effect of that the whatever it is, that document that you need to sign, the right of entry or whatever it's called, all that stuff isn't necessary because the testing, you guys don't need to have entry to my home or property to do the testing. You guys can do it from the easement and then at the closest point within the city limits to the offending property location. So, I mean, to use that as an excuse really is a moot point because there's no need to have access to my property. On top of that, I've supplied multiple recordings, not only from my property, but also from the offending location's easements to compare the sound that I'm hearing, so that way I could try to convey to the best of my ability what exactly it was that I'm hearing. I tried to explain it and express it very clearly and explicitly to try to give anybody a good understanding of what it is that I'm talking about. Unfortunately, it just seems like it's mostly falling on deaf ears, for lack of better terms, no pun intended. And I just...
you come up with your own analysis and solution, and you don't let the rest of us do our job. And it's just even like right now. So you've analyzed that we need to set up this device on somebody else's property.
That's not what I said.
We don't need to do it on your property. You're the complainant. So therefore, I wanted to put it on your property to see exactly what you were either feeling or hearing. And you wouldn't let him do that. And now you want to place blame on us when you wouldn't let my contractor perform his work.
No, well, he can do his work. See, his work isn't contingent upon his having access to my property. His work could be performed perfectly fine if he just did it off of the easement or to the city limits. I mean, he doesn't have to necessarily do it on a property location. He can do it on the easement or even the roadway, off the what do you call it, the shoulder of the roadway, and test the nearest possible location to the offending property location. It's pretty simple. I read about this in the law and how the testing is supposed to be done. I'm expecting you guys to you know, kind of go by what the law states. I mean, in fact, when I questioned your law director, I can't remember his name off the top of my head now, David Tarbert.
Yeah.
Yeah, when I questioned him in the trial, I asked him specifically if he was aware if there was any agreement with Falls Township or any other municipal corporation outside of the city limits, because Ohio Revised Code says specifically that it is the municipal corporation's responsibility, especially if there's an agreement between the municipal corporations. I'm kind of paraphrasing roughly, but I think you get my drift, right?
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Well, according to Ohio Revised Code 715.49, both sections A and B, I don't have it sitting right in front of me, but it describes that it's the municipal corporation's responsibility to address noise and disturbance issues arising. And basically the way it describes it or explains it is that regardless of where the source of the noise is, whether it's in the city limits or outside the city limits, there is actions that can be taken. Again, I'm paraphrasing, but especially if there's, and it mentions in one of the sections, if there's an agreement between the municipal corporations. So if there happened to be an agreement between Zanesville Municipal Corporation or the City of Zanesville, whatever it's called, technically, and then Falls Township Municipal Corporation, if there was an agreement between those, the two corporations to address noise and disturbance issues that may arise, there at times there are agreements like that put in place between the public servants of the corporations, the municipal corporations. Well, I had asked David Tarbert about this because I figured him being the law director, he should be aware if there are any agreements that are already in existence. And he just kind of looked at me with a confused look on his face and said he didn't know what I was talking about. So that tells me after 3 years of me complaining about this, over 3 years now, I mean, the law director didn't even have the wherewithal to properly investigate to see if there's even an agreement between the municipal corporations to address the noise issue. It's always been looked at as if I'm the problem, not the noise being the problem, and I don't understand why.
Let me ask you this. Do you understand what chain of custody of evidence is?
I've heard of it. I'm not 100% clear on it.
So that basically means if we're going to file charges against any corporation or person or anything like that, we have to be able to document all of our evidence.
Okay.
And how we gathered it, whose custody it was,
Okay.
all the way up till trial.
Okay.
The only way we can do that is if we gather the evidence, knowing the process and procedure, and identify the source, identify the harm, and then we can use that at that point to file charges. We cannot just use any document submitted to us that we have not verified. It just doesn't work that way.
Right. No, I get that.
So that's what I was trying to do, was find out exactly what, gather up evidence so that we could sort of have a better idea of exactly what the issue was. But then again, like I mentioned, somewhere in the summer of last year, I had a gentleman from, again, north of Zanesville complain about the same thing. So, what I would probably do, even though that's not in the city, that might be a good piece of evidence to also go after to see if it matched what you had. At the end of the day, I've got to be able to document what you're alleging, and you're not letting me document what you're alleging.
That's not true.
It doesn't matter what you submit to us; we have to document.
Right, but see you're describing it in a wrong way to make it seem like I'm the one that's preventing you from doing your job. That's not the case. You're using this isolated incident. Any testing could have been done at any given point along the way from the easements or from any given point in the city, within the city limits, not just my property. Along with that, I've had conversations with police officers. One of the sergeants at the police department who admitted that he didn't properly investigate the noise. I mean, there was one night I filed a complaint about the safe company, and in the conversation that I have recorded, the sergeant admitted that he drove to the safe company's parking lot. He sat in the parking lot. He admitted that he heard the noise, and it was loud. But he didn't do anything about it. He didn't file a report. He didn't do anything past that point. He just drove away and forgot about it. And so I had asked him.
Do you think it's a stave company then?
They're one of the offending businesses, yes,
Okay.
operators or however you want to describe them. On my YouTube channel, that I've been sending links to these recordings to the police department through the email portal online. I don't know if they've been able to get a hold of these or not. But what I was doing is with my verbal complaints over the phone, I was also recording the noise, and so I would send a copy or a link to my posting on my YouTube channel to the police department. So that way they could not only have my verbal complaint about the noise, but then they could also have access to the recordings. So that way it would help them better determine what they could do to investigate this, and maybe then they could help you guys get a better idea or understanding of how to get your technical evidence. It seemed to me that the whole aspect of wanting to gain access to my property seemed like an excuse, because there's thousands of other places that the testing could be done from. Not to mention the easement right here at the end of my property. So when AEB came out and did their noise assessment, they didn't need to have me sign anything to allow them to gain access to my property. The actual company itself, I could have worked with them if that was what they required to do their testing, and I could have provided something to that effect to that company. But I just think it's a bit of a overreach for the government to ask for access to my property, because it seemed like up until that point that I really didn't have the faith to believe that anything was actually going to come of it. To me, it seemed like at that point that it was just another excuse that I was being given, because up until that point, even now, after almost 3.5 years, nothing's really been done to address the issue. And now there's other. I'm aware of other property owners beside. I never knew about the one that you had mentioned up on the north part of town, but there are other property owners over here off of Sharon Avenue that have been complaining about this, that are disturbed by it. Some of which don't know who to complain to, because they've seen now how I've been treated and what I've been subjected to for my complaints and what's happened to me. So they're a little standoffish and a little hesitant to complain, because they don't want the same thing to happen to them.
Well, let me ask you this. So are they complaining about Casting Solutions, or are they complaining about the stave company?
For them, I can't really speak for them, but all I can tell you is what I've heard, and what I've heard is that primarily it's the stave company, from my knowledge. But again, I can't speak for them.
Okay.
You'd have to ask them. And that was something I made the police department aware of too. They could have investigated and asked some of the property owners along Sharon Avenue.
This is why I really need. So at one point we're talking about it's coming from stave. Another point we're talking about is coming from Casting Solutions. The reason I need to have equipment on your property, and by the way, I don't think this is equipment that can sit outdoors. I'll have to ask Chris Cover, but it was my understanding it was, again, it's electronic equipment, it's got to be kept out of the rain, that kind of thing. But the only way we can really identify it is having this equipment there, trying to figure out what the electronic contour is, what the fingerprint is. Again, whether it's magnetic, whether it's a sound wave, whether it's electronic, identify what it is. But you wouldn't let anybody on. Now, I can't how do I know that it is exactly what the guy off of Military Road is complaining about? Because he is point blank saying it's coming from Casting Solutions. And that may or may not be the same thing you're hearing, because I also hear you saying it's the stave company also. So, again, if I'm going to go to court and have Dave Tarver go to court and file charges, we can't be iffy. We have to be certain, and you're not letting us be certain. And those streets are very narrow where you live. I don't know that I could inhibit the existing right-of-way, because you normally have like a ditch or something there. And I don't think I can set this stuff outside. We don't own the power poles. AEP and the phone company own those poles. So I really don't know where we could put equipment. Again, I'll check with Chris Cover, but I think his equipment was indoor equipment.
Okay. Well, I wasn't. I was inquiring about that with Chris Cover to find out, if it was required to be indoors or if it could sit outdoors. Because I posed the same question to him about doing the testing from the easement. He made no comment about any, being required to be indoors for any purpose. I mean, not that that's not necessary. I'm just making the comment that he didn't mention that I don't recall him mentioning that. And that was another reason that I was adamant about what was the reason for the right of access to the property, because it could be done outside on the easement. And he never made an issue or had any issue with it being outside. He just
So let me ask you this:
Sure.
What would you like? What move or action would you like?
Well, I mean, at this point, I don't know if there's anything that would actually fix the situation because my life's been turned upside down and destroyed. Now I'm a convicted felon because dispatchers don't want to take complaints and they want to play games on the phone, and they can misconstrue that, and a prosecutor can misconstrue that and paint an incorrect picture that I had the intent to cause harm to the community because I was calling for their service. So
I'm not aware of any felony conviction, Brandon.
Oh yeah. Oh, I'm surprised you weren't made aware. Yeah, because of the incompetence of the police department, they lied and said that I was harassing them, and that I had intent to harm the community. And so they used an isolated incident where, and I've got the same recordings they do. In fact, in my recordings, it even has my reactions to their behavior when the dispatchers are hanging up on me on the phone when they're answering the handset but not saying anything. They just sit there in silence, and I'm saying hello, is anybody there? And I can hear them giggling in the background, making jokes about my complaints. I mean, this is all recorded, and and then when they constantly hang up on me and they don't tell me why, they don't take my complaint or let me go on about my day or go on about their business. They play these games on the phone, and then they say that I'm harassing them.
Okay, if you would like, I can send an email to make sure that, and I'm assuming you use this phone number, so maybe, does it come up as saying Brandon Kelleran, or what is it, when you use that number, does it just have your number?
You mean like what does it show up on the caller ID of the phone that I'm calling?
Like when you call in, we have caller ID. Does it come up as your name, or does it come up as just a phone number?
I have no idea. I've never seen your guys' caller ID or how it comes up on your guys' end.
Okay. Right.
But I mean, after all the contacts that I've had with the police department, they are fully aware. If it does come up on, whether it comes up with my name or the phone number, they're familiar with it enough to where they identify who it is that's calling in every time I've called in. And it's just been a constant like hassle to even file the complaints with the dispatchers, and so they've just conveniently manipulated a situation to their advantage, and in my opinion abused me on the phone, and used my confusion against me to be able to create a charge of let's see, what was it, a misdemeanor of telecommunications harassment again, just like all the other times that failed the municipal court and they couldn't get it right. Because it was all based on nonsense. But then they added a felony charge of obstructing of official business because they tried to say that my calls for service were preventing them from doing their job. But that would have happened if they would have just done their job to begin with. Because if they would have just taken the complaint, I would have gone about my business and not bothered them anymore to make any more complaints or try to finish the complaint. And but they, I guess that'd be the easiest thing to do.
Well, Brandon, what I'm willing to do is email or put in the United States mail to you a consent or right of entry so that we can set electronic equipment and so that we can capture and identify if the source is Stave Company or if the source is Casting Solutions. But for me to gather evidence, I've got to start where you're complaining from, because we don't have complaints from other citizens where you live.
That's
now,
not
you've
true.
mentioned there's other people.
Yeah.
But it sounds like they're saying it's the Stave Company.
Well, that's one of the things that they mentioned to me, and they weren't 100% certain if Casting Solutions was a problem for them or not. Possibly because the noise from the Stave Company, I would presume, with them being that close to the Stave Company, that the noise from the Stave Company is probably so loud that they may not be able to hear it. I don't know. I don't want to speak for them or assume anything.
Okay.
But being where I'm at, it's very, and it has changed a little bit. I don't know if they've made changes out there, but at night I do still hear it's a higher pitch ringing noise. It's almost the same pitch and tone as the tornado sirens. That's why it's so disturbing, because when I hear it go off and it's constant, even if I do get to sleep or get any rest relaxation, I hear that and it immediately makes me think it's the tornado sirens, and I'm looking out for severe storms or tornadoes. And it just, in the back of my mind, it's constantly got me on alert because I constantly hear that sound. And maybe it's just because of my military background. I don't know. I doubt it, because I've been out of the military for so long.
Let me ask you this. Did you once tell me that when you leave your location, you go somewhere else, the sound goes away?
Now, that's different. See, let me just clarify something here. early on, I didn't know what exactly where the noise was coming from, what was making the noise. So I just heard a bunch of noise. So I was confused, trying to
Right.
figure it out along the way. As it's progressed, and now after all this time, I've determined that it's multiple sources. So in some instances, it's noise from casting solutions, in which I would make specific complaints against casting solutions when it was their noise, and I would record specifically from my property and at their location at that time of the complaint, just to make a distinction. Same with the Save Company, when they were making noise and they were being disturbing. I would file a complaint directly against them. Or if it was both of the locations that were operating at the same time making disturbing noise, I would make that clear to the dispatcher, try to convey that to the dispatcher that it was one or both, one or the other or both of those locations. But then it's at one point along the way, it came to my attention that there's a third noise that I'm dealing with. That's a low frequency humming noise that's constant 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, during the day and all night long, that I hear, that I thought was coming from these other locations as well, because it sounds very mechanical. It sounds like a diesel engine or of some type, excuse me, like a locomotive or a 18-wheeler idling. Excuse me, but it's constant. And that was back when I suspected it might be like the wastewater treatment plant, because that was one of the only things I could think of that runs 24/7 that could possibly make a noise like this, but I wasn't certain. And I was just trying to rule out the possibilities. And it came to my attention after doing some research and investigation that the noise is actually coming from the power lines. Back in July 2018, I had it confirmed through a PUCO complaint that AEP did make changes to the electric grid out here. That was when they added the mesh network wireless system and these wireless meters and whatever else they had done out here with the equipment to make the changes for that. And that's at the same time frame that this low frequency noise started up. And that's what made me think that these other businesses, the Stave Company and Casting Solutions and any other businesses out there that I haven't identified that might be making noise at night, I thought that the noise might be coming from them. But I also noticed at the same time I started hearing this low frequency humming noise, that the noise from these local area businesses started to become louder and louder. And progressively over time, it's gotten louder and louder. And now inside my house, just laying there, I can hear it plain as day, even if I've got music playing. And it's probably just because my ears now have been so trained, because I've been forced to hear it for so long.
Let me ask you this. Have you ever been diagnosed with tinnitus?
I have, but that's altogether different. That has to do.
I have tinnitus, and it does change. Sometimes it's a low hum. Sometimes it's a higher pitch. I wear hearing aids because it helps me overcome tinnitus. Have you seen an audiologist about that?
Of course, I've spoken to multiple audiologists, ear, nose, and throat doctors, and have gone round and round about all this, because the only way that makes sense is if I experience the same thing when I'm away from my property. And unfortunately, I don't, or fortunately, however you want to look at it. The sound goes away, the sensations, the symptoms go away. In fact, back in when I had the electric service connected to my property, I had the drop line or whatever they call it, and the meter on my structure still, the home. Back then, when the service was still connected and working, I was experiencing a lot more debilitating health symptoms that I couldn't explain, that started up out of the blue at the same time frame in July 2018 that I started hearing this low frequency humming noise. When I had that service disconnected, when I had to remove the drop line and the meter box and everything from my property, so I didn't have any connection to the grid, I noticed roughly 90 to 95%, I'm estimating, of course, of the severe health problems that I was dealing with disappeared. But unfortunately, I was still dealing with this low frequency noise, this rumble or humming noise, whatever you want to call it or describe it as. And I had AEP come out and perform a noise assessment back in, I think it was April of 2020. And this was after I concluded, this was a different complaint that I had with PUCO, that they had come out and did this noise assessment, and they identified high levels of low frequency noise across my property. Some of the readings, I think, were close to 55 decibels, if I remember correctly. And according to their graph that they sent with the results of the assessment, it shows on their graph that at roughly 20 to 22 decibels, it's kind of a little convoluted where the actual line is, but it's roughly in that range, 20 to 22 decibels. Amplitude is where sleep disturbances begin according to their graph, and I had levels of over 50 decibels, so over twice of where the level is that sleep disturbances begin. So it identified that there is a potential issue, but they've refused to do anything about it, and I haven't been able to get AEP or the PUCO to effectively do anything about that. So essentially, just to kind of clarify, there's actually multiple right now I've identified 3 different sources of noise. I have this low frequency noise coming from the power lines 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. That's been validated by a noise assessment from AEP and complaints to the PUCO. And then I've identified these 2 businesses, the Stave Company and Casting Solutions, that operate from time to time. It's not always 100% of the time, every night. There are some nights I don't hear their production at all. And then there's other nights I hear both of them, and it is just, it kind of varies. And I tried to make that clear to the dispatchers and to the police officers that I had spoken to and find these complaints. But they never really...
Let me do this. I've always found in life that in tackling complex solutions, the best way is one by one. So let me start with Stave Company, because that's reasonably identifiable.
Okay.
Let me see if I can find some noise measuring devices that I can locate, put on a location nearby so I can see if they're violating the city ordinance. So let me see if I can tackle Stave Company first. I will ask PUCO and AEP if there's any study or report they can give me on, and do you live on White Oak, is it?
Yes.
Okay, on White Oak. And for right now, we'll just put Casting Solutions on hold because I don't think that gentleman's called me from Winding Way for probably 2 or 3 months, but he's called me twice in the last year and a half, and he knows that he's not in the city. He just wanted me to know. But so right now, let me try to tackle Stave Company.
Okay.
And but we have not received complaints from other citizens. I'll check with code enforcement, but I don't think we have. But I'll also try to inquire if AEP is willing to share anything with me that they have.
Okay. Yeah, that'd be a great start. And just so you're aware, there are other complaints that have been filed. I've been told anyways by this other property owners that they have filed complaints with Streets and Sanitation about the Stave Company specifically. I'm not sure about any other complaints that they may have filed, but I know specifically about the Stave Company. They informed me that they've complained to Streets and Sanitation, and they informed me also that they have complained to the police department. But at one time, they were so rude to them on the phone, and this was about the same time that I was being charged and dragged through court and all this with this felony stuff, that they were frightened by the way that they were treated by dispatch, and I don't know if they've called back since.
Well, I'll tackle those 2 things, and I'll see. And I don't know why somebody would call it Streets, but that's okay. I'll check into if Susie's received any complaints. Typically, either code enforcement or the community development department, the 2 places for those kind of complaints, Brandon.
Okay.
I have your phone number.
Yeah, and you got my email too, if that's more convenient for you. I know you're busy. It's just I was hoping to get this rectified and resolved so that way I could stay here. But at this point, based on the situation, I can't live under these conditions of this constant nuisance and disturbance. And then also on top of that, the treatment that I've been subjected to by the Zanesville Police Department and having my life threatened multiple times at my property. I can't live under these conditions, and so at some point I'm probably going to have to be forced to walk away from my property to be able to salvage my life and kind of pick up the pieces, so to speak, from all the destruction that's been caused because of all this behavior or actions or whatever however you want to classify it. And so, yeah, I mean, I don't know. At this point, it's somewhat of a moot point because the damage has already been done. But if there,
I will use the email then as a way of contacting you. But I'll address those 2 issues because I'm not saying they're the easiest, but one is sound waves, and that's Stave, and that's a little bit easier than magnetic or other inconveniences. And if you're saying AEP has report, maybe I can find the AEP report. So I'll tackle those 2 items right now.
Okay, and just so you're aware, I may have sent you the copy of the AEP assessment. So you may have that copy there. It'll have the reference case number, or I don't know if it was an informal or a formal complaint. I can't recall. I think it was informal, but it should. I'm almost positive I sent that information to you for your own records.
I'll look for it. I'll look for it, Brandon.
If not, I might be able to dig up a copy of it. And if I can find one, I'll forward you a copy to your email.
Thank you, Brandon.
Yep. Yeah. Hey, I appreciate any cooperation or help. It's unfortunate it's had to go this far, and this much damage has been done to my life. But hopefully, we can make a difference for other residents here in Zanesville, other inhabitants, that hopefully they won't have to be treated the same way I've been.
I agree with you, Brandon.
All right. Well, thank you for your time. I appreciate it. Yeah. If you have any questions or concerns, feel free to reach out anytime, whichever's more convenient, phone or email or whichever.
Thank you, sir. Have a good day.
You too. God bless you. Take care. Bye bye.